good morning, and good afternoon to in-house counsel from all across America and the world. Welcome to In-House Connect. My name is Shai Mahani. I am the CEO and co-founder of In-House Connect, and I'm thrilled to have you here with us today. Thank you for spending your breakfast time or your lunch time with us, or even your dinner time with us. And special thanks to our wonderful sponsor, LawView, and our fantastic presenter today, Lucy Bassli, for putting together a fantastic presentation on using policy templates and playbooks to become more efficient today. For those of you here for the first time, let me give you a quick bit of background on In-House Connect. In-House Connect started 12 years ago as a New York City-based meetup group for in-house counsel. Every month, In-House Connect would organize networking events that were hosted by different law firms and were then hosted by, and then every 6 months, we organized fun and festive networking mixers. Over the years, we've helped thousands of in-house counsel connect with peers and outside counsel alike. The group was humming along, and then, of course, COVID hit. We couldn't meet in person, so we met online, and it's been a fantastic, fantastic transition. We've been able to attract a much larger audience of in-house counsel, truly from coast to coast, and we've been able to feature high-caliber speakers like the three we have today, who I'm going to introduce in just a few moments. This is our 44th event of the year, and I'm wondering, is this your first IHC event, or have you attended one with us before? Looks like we have a 70-30 split, so 30% new people and 70% returning. So it's great to see the 30% coming for the first time, and it's great to see you again to the 70%. Let's get to today's program. CLM Simplified, using policy templates and playbooks to become more efficient today. Our presenters today are Lucy Bassli, and Lucy is joined today by Jennifer McIver and Matt Vaughn of LawView. Lucy Bassli is an attorney, author of The Simple Guide to Legal Innovation, and the founder and principal of InnoLaw Group. As a former assistant general counsel of legal ops and contracting at Microsoft, she redefined how legal work is done and created one of the first managed service engagements with a law firm. In 2015, she was named to the National Journal List of Outstanding Women Lawyers and was an ACC Value Champion in 2016. Before joining Microsoft, Lucy was an associate at Davis, Wright & Tremaine in Seattle and the commercial bankruptcy and business transactions practices. Lucy is a highly sought-after legal industry expert working with corporate legal departments and law firms on modernizing legal service delivery, automation, smart risk-taking, and alternative resourcing models. She trains and consults with lawyers who take best practices in the legal industry to a new level. Our next panelist is Jennifer McIver. Jennifer is an attorney with a passion for connecting corporate legal departments and technology. Recognizing the value legal technology can bring to the practice of law, Jennifer made the transition from private practice to legal tech. For the last 10 years, Jennifer has become a trusted advisor to many legal teams as they increase efficiency and accuracy, reduce spend, and incorporate data and analytics into daily practices. As the U.S. Director of Strategy at LawView, Jennifer is focusing on connecting in-house legal departments not only with each other, but with their internal organizations as well. And our final panelist is Matt Vaughn. Matt is the EVP of Partnerships and Corporate Development at LawView, focusing on LawView's growing ecosystem of third-party tools and service providers that enhance the value of the LawView platform for in-house legal teams. Matt is a qualified attorney in California and in New Zealand. He has worked as a corporate attorney in both public and private technology companies and in private practice in multiple jurisdictions, with focus on venture capital and technology companies. Among those roles, Matt was previously the GC at Xero, taking responsibility for Xero's legal, IP, M&A, and compliance function, including listing Xero on the equivalent of the stock exchange for Australia and New Zealand. So we have an awesome panel today. I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm going to kick it over to Lucy to get us started.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Shai. My goodness, all these introductions, it just makes me feel that much older when I realize how long my history is in the world of commercial contracting and legal. So I am delighted, though, to be here to talk about my favorite topic. It's the second in a series. As you all can see, we have CLM Simplified Part 2. We've been working on a series, Shai and I, and we've got 2 more parts coming. So it will be a total of 4. Today, we do have some specific focus we want to get into, as you all saw in the title of the session, with templates and playbooks and doing things to make CLM better for you today. And we'll dive right in. But before we do, nobody can pass through their inbox probably without seeing something about CLM technology. And I will say this over and over, CLM is not just the technology. It is a series of very complex processes and cross-enterprise maneuvers and flows of different people interacting and engaging with different functions and professional backgrounds, all with the business goal, of course, of helping the company make money or maybe spend money a little bit better. But contracts are the lifeline of most businesses. So CLM is quite holistic, and there's been an explosion in the technology space for sure. We are lucky to have with us one of those fantastic tech providers in LawView, and we'll be bringing them in on a couple of questions I'm going to throw at them throughout this discussion. But really, that's a hot topic, and many of you might be here because eventually you're also going to be looking at technology to help become a little bit more efficient. Maybe you already are, maybe you're already in the throes of it. So with that, I do want to start with one quick poll so that we can kind of get an idea of where people are in their CLM journey from the perspective of technology. Here's our poll. It just opened. We'll give that a couple of seconds, and while we do, I will just kind of give a couple of thoughts on what I see going on in the tech space of in the CLM world. Really, those of you who are researching, trying to kind of figure it out, you'll see that it's quite a complex space. There are a lot of technologies that are being thrown into the CLM tech bucket that actually, I would call them almost CLM tangential, right, or adjacent, because there are some really core, I would say, point solutions, right? There's specific solutions related to contracts. Maybe it's, a deep dive into the content itself, into the four corners of the document. And there's some interesting things happening there from a technology perspective, and solutions specifically for that problem to solve when people are searching for data, of course, and insights on their contracting and their terms. And then there are CLM platforms, entire platforms that have workflows, and they help move contracts along across an enterprise, and they're tracking, the state of that contracting process more than maybe looking inside the four corners of the system. Whatever it is you're looking at, just know the pain that you're trying to solve, understand your top problem and pain points, and then you can really dive in probably a little bit more confidently into your CLM tech research and search. But certainly there are a lot of options out there, and it takes a little bit of homework to figure out what works best for you in your scenario, in your corporate culture, in your industry, in your geography, lots of different ways to slice and dice that technology conversation. Actually, we will be doing a deep dive into selecting the right CLM technology, and that will be our fourth and final session in this series. We kind of saved that big bang topic for last, although I don't have my chat open right now. I will eventually, but I have people reading it for me. At some point, I'm sure we're going to get the question, which system should we use? And so because we have our friends at LawView here, I know their answer, but that is a question I will not be answering in this hour today. So let's take a look at our poll results. There's still a few more coming in, but it looks like we have a pretty even split. Wow, that's really exciting to see. That means we're going to cover, again, this question will not be directly answered. It's not the core focus here, but we are going to be definitely threading in technology and automation opportunities throughout this, because we all know really the best way to become most efficient and optimized, we're going to have to get a little technology in there. I love tech, but it's not always the answer, and it's definitely not the first thing to do. So we're going to jump into one of the first things that we should do. I think we can end the poll. We have a pretty good split. Again, for those who can or can't see it, we've got about a quarter. I mean, it's between 22% and 27% on each of our four answers. Those of you who have one and are happy with it, I salute you. Kudos. Pop the champagne. That is amazing. Woohoo! You are in a envious position, I think, for some of our other friends that are in this webinar, and many other friends that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. Have one, but thinking about making change. Yep. I have a client who is on their fourth CLM system implementation, and at some point I'm going to ask, is it you or is it them? But that's a topic for another session. Actively looking, okay, great. There are definitely a lot of people also in this position out there in the world who may or may not be on this webinar and haven't thought about it yet. Okay, and you may not need to, but depending on the problem, you might. So I have a little button here that says share results, and I just kind of walk through that, which I think you all might be seeing now. So with that, we now know who has joined us. Let's jump in, talk about contracting. In case you don't know, those of you who are here, we also always start with a little moment of therapy. Contracting is everyone's problem. You're all here because you probably still have some problem you are trying to solve. Even those with a super happy technology system, there are probably still other things that you want to do to make it better. Every law department that I have come across, I've not come across all of them, but I'm going to challenge somebody to say that they have figured out their contracting problem. It is as smooth as it possibly can be. They have all the insights they could possibly want. They have predictability, and they are as efficient as possible. Everybody struggles a little bit, and too many contracts, not enough time. We hear it all the time. The business is frustrated. Legal's a black hole. Legal's an easy department to blame when it comes to contracts. We kind of create we in-house, I'm going to wear my in-house hat because I lived that world for a very long time. We're kind of an easy place to blame, right? When the contracts are involved, there is an immediate connection between contracts and legal. To the extent there's a legal department, most of you on this call are probably in a legal department in a corporate entity, and you know that contracts, for some reason, better or worse, equals legal. Contracts are slow, contracts are lost, people can't find them. Must be that legal had something to do with it, or is taking too long, or we just don't know. And that lack of predictability causes a lot of frustration in the business. So we know it's everyone's problem, but also it's really not just the law department's problem to solve. It really isn't. We tend to jump in and solve it, mostly because we are often involved in contracting. Well, often, right? If there is a law department of any size, even if you're a department of one, you are being roped into contracting, negotiations, creating templates, whatever it is, or certainly contracting problems come to legal often, you know, and legal is always part of those decisions, or those important decisions when it comes to key contracts, to key issues, to big negotiations, the bet the company type of deals. Legal squarely in the middle of that, and oftentimes a key decision maker. Sometimes we're over-functioning a little bit. Legal tends to step into gaps of these contracting functions and processes and steps, and we may be doing a little bit more than we should. I won't bore you all with all the different phases of CLM and the contracting lifecycle, but there are many phases and many steps in which legal really shouldn't be playing too much of a role. I'll give my favorite example, chasing signatures. Signatures are not something that legal should be involved in. Number one, legal, please do not sign contracts, ever. Unless you are the business owner of that engagement, unless you are bringing in a service provider of some sort into your department for your purposes, and you're assigning that agreement, and you're the business owner in that context, fantastic. But as general counsel, as CLO, please do not sign IT contracts. Please do not sign human resource outsourcing contracts. And the list goes on and on. We see it too often. It's really not the right role you want to be in. You want to be legal advisor. You want to be legal counsel. So A, don't sign. B, do not chase signatures. Please do not be the one that's going, I don't know where that is. I don't know. Did it ever get signed? Who got it signed? What can I send it to them? Where's the latest? Let me find the right person to sign. Nope. We're going to enable the business to do that. More on that a little bit later today, and more in another session. We'll be doing the third one where we'll dive deep into smart resourcing of the contracting process. So I will hop off of that soapbox and we will dive into why we're here today. What can you do to make contracting faster, better, smarter today? The goal is for you to walk away after our session and be able to do one little thing, one little tweak, a little change, or at least put something on your radar to say, you know what, that we can tackle. In the next month, we should be able to do this thing, this change, and that should make contracting a little bit more effective. We really want to make sure we're giving you practical tips. I've created a CLM house. I've lived in one for a long time. I still live in one. I can't get out. Here's how I want everybody to kind of think about, again, CLM. Not just the technology, right? Contract lifecycle management. It's a complex lifecycle, and lots of different departments and functions across the company play a role. But I want to orient us around thinking about it this way. We've got automation, the bottom here. It's kind of foundational. It can be if you have it. Let's expand the definition of automation. Let's talk about email, Slack, or messaging, whatever you use. Let's talk about OneDrive, G Drive, document storage in the cloud. Technology is probably a better way of thinking about it. We can't do our contracts without technology. We can't anymore. Nobody has a typewriter where they are punching out a contract. We're not messaging hard copies anymore, hopefully, for signature with pens, although we know that's still happening. And I'm sure people are seeing the clips of now King Charles having trouble signing because the pen runs out of ink, which at first I thought was a meme. Like I really had to go, is that really him? I still don't know if it is. That's one for the chat box. That's not a meme, right? I'm not crazy, at least not on this topic. But anyway, technology lives and breathes through everything we do today. There's kind of the lower tech, and then there's the higher tech with all the different CLM systems that again, I mentioned earlier, and we'll talk about in another session more deeply. But the other foundational things we want to talk about is a legal review policy. And we're going to tackle that as our first topic today in a minute. And then we're going to dive into, of course, templates, playbooks, a little bit of roles and responsibilities. These are all the things that need to be solid. Then the in-house team gets to kind of sit on top, pick and choose the top things that they want to deal with, the deals they want to be involved in, the role that they want to play in the CLM house. But you're kind of also that, you're the air cover. Legal gets to be there going, okay, we're going to protect this thing. We're going to do what we need to do to make sure this house doesn't crumble. And it doesn't mean we're going to do everything. The way to stop doing everything is to spend the time building some of this foundation. Now, I know it is very hard in your day job as a commercial contracts lawyer or as a GC, as a legal department of one, potentially, to kind of stop the day job and do some of the things we're going to talk about. And I do completely understand that and appreciate that. That tidal wave of contracts is not stopping. It just kind of keeps coming. And it's never a good time to go, okay, you know what? I'm not going to take any contracts for the next 3 weeks. I really want to do a deep dive into some of these foundational things that I want to do. But at the same time, there's always an opportunity to pivot when these things are coming at you, when these non-stop volume of contracts is flooding you, your inbox, the level of frustration gets high, and there's a great time to kind of stop the madness, even without spending too much time kind of thinking through these foundational principles. But let's start first with the legal review policy. Oh, why did that go backwards? We're going to go ahead. So legal review policy, contract review policy, contracting policy. It can be called a lot of things. That is the one thing I will say now. There is no standardized taxonomy when it comes to CLM. That's part of the problem. There are some of us out there trying to force one by sheer will and repetitive soapbox lecturing, which may or may not be welcomed, but it creates a lot of confusion in the market. And it creates confusion when you're out there shopping for a system or solution, but it also creates confusion internally within corporate entities, especially as people switch jobs and they're calling things different things that maybe, what they called them in their old job. But what I'm talking about with a legal review policy is that every in-house legal team should have a philosophy on what they should and shouldn't be doing when it comes to contracts, which types of contracts they should or shouldn't be doing. Policy is a big word. And again, I know that culturally that may not work within your corporate entity. You might want to call it a guideline. You might want to call it a philosophy. You might want to call it a best practice. It doesn't matter what you call it. The goal here for us is to really get everybody into the frame of mind that, to liberate you from you don't have to do every contract that comes to your inbox. You don't. That is a fact. The legal department is not a purely responsive, reactive function that is there to do whatever the business sends to them. Yes, we are a support organization. Absolutely, we're here to support the business. But supporting the business does not mean that you are at the beck and call of doing whatever somebody else assigns to you as your day job. You get to decide that. And that's the first step that I see a lot of law departments kind of gloss over because, again, we don't have time to take steps. Nobody takes a job and go, great, I'm going to do these 20 things before I actually start work. I get it. You got to jump in, you got to do the work, and you learn more and more about how to create the right policy based on the volume of work that's coming in, the type of work that's coming in. But what this policy is intended to do is intended to kind of take a stance to the rest of the company. And the first stance is, number one, you don't get to assign work to me and create for me my day job and my agenda for the day. Emergencies aside, absolutely. But by the way, subtext, your emergency, business owner, does not equal my emergency. because you've been out of town for 3 weeks and suddenly realized you're about to hit deadline. We all live and breathe that world. And sometimes you're going to bend and flex to make things work. But the point is, this is your proactive statement to the company to say, here's the role legal is going to play in contracting. And we're going to talk about two types of policies. The one you're looking at here, this kind of approach and this triangle I've pieced together, is really more of that, the substantive type of policy where you're saying, these are the types of contracts we in legal do or don't want to do. And by the way, a policy can be written in that kind of proactive sense, or maybe inclusive sense as opposed to the exclusive sense. For example, you can say legal must be involved in all contracts except the following types, and you can list out the following types. And now you have clearly delegated a specific list, number, identify types of contracts where you have empowered the business to go on their merry way without legal. Yes, that is hard. And the next things we'll talk about is how to do that. Hence the templates and the playbooks. We'll get there in a minute. But the first step to recovery is saying, there are some things I will not look at. There are some things I will just have to look away from, regardless of how poorly they might be done. That is kind of one approach to the policy, and you list those things out. The other approach to the policy is, of course, hey, legal doesn't need to see anything except for these types of contracts. So now that list and that scope that you define, it is the only set of types of contracts that legal wants to see. This one is, of course, a higher risk tolerance approach. There's no right or wrong. If you are a department of one in a hyper growth SaaS company, you might very well start there and go, right now, I can't breathe. Unless it is an A, B, C, or D, don't give it to me. Don't call me. Do it yourself. That could be perfectly acceptable in the scenario that you are in. Or the thought of that is giving you immediate hives and a little nausea. And so you shouldn't go that route. You should find something in the middle. And of course, there can be hybrids. But the substantive type of policies where you're talking about really a risk tolerance. And these are not operational risks. This is the substantive risk. What's inside the four corners of these contracts? What are the terms, the issues, the concepts that you don't want the business dealing with on their own without legal support, or vice versa? You have taken really a very active stance to say, hey, this is the stuff that legal absolutely must see because these are the highest risks to the company, and I need to be involved. The legal department, need to be involved. So let's do a quick walkthrough of kind of how I've triaged this in prior lives and what I see happening more and more across most companies. So let's start at the bottom with enabling the business owners. And when I say business owners, you'll see that's different than that middle layer where we have contracting professionals. Again, everybody on this webinar is in a different situation. You may or may not have contracting professionals anywhere in the company. You might have a department of 150 contracting professionals sitting somewhere else. You might have them in legal, but we're going to really kind of, let's set the stage here that by business owner, I mean actually the person, that corporate employee who's decided they need to engage a third party for some services because they're buying something, or they're the sales folks. They're out there pounding the pavement, making money for the business, and the way to do that is to issue a contract. So whether it's a sales type of role or a business development type of role, whoever it is that is out there actually needing the contract to accomplish their business objective. Those are the business owners. The reason I want to be very crisp on that is what we're talking about are usually the people who aren't contract experts. Their day job requires them to access, touch, do something with contracting, but they're not experts in contract negotiations, contract drafting, editing, review. But it's kind of a bit of a necessary evil for them. It is a bit of a required stumbling, hurdle they have to take every time. So for this body of people, which is by all accounts, the largest volume of people, number of people proportionately in this triangle, this is kind of the company employees, think of them that way. This is where you want to empower and enable them to do something that is absolutely the lowest risk type of document and type of contract or type of transaction, which, by the way, your policy can mention contract names and contract types. MSA, Master Service Agreement, for example, can be a contract, type that you put into a policy that may or may not make sense for your business. So you might be better off describing the type of engagement, right? The purchase of services, that could be what's in your policy, or the sale of core company assets and services. That could be a description. So think a little bit about whether you want to use the names of contract types or templates. If there's a common taxonomy, that might be great, or maybe a little bit more descriptive on what is the substantive nature of the engagement. But I'm going to pick on one of my favorite templates throughout this whole conversation. NDAs, they're my favorite. They are absolutely my favorite. And let me tell you why. I'm going to say something a little bit controversial. Feel free to jump in on the chat or otherwise, or catch me in the networking afterwards if you really want to go at it. But I'm going to venture to say most of us do not go to law school with the hopes and dream of negotiating NDAs. It was my dream. Of course, in law school, they don't teach us much about contract negotiation, sadly, anyway. And oftentimes, that's the first contract we do, and we're kind of excited. And that's great when you're what we lovingly refer to in the US, a baby lawyer. And that's good. You got to get your practice and training on some things. I don't know what's going to be our jurisdiction. I'm going to fight it in the US, New York, California. And then we get into these debates. But when you're in practice long enough, which is not very long in this case, NDAs are a perfect contract to get legal out of. Now, in order to do that, we're going to get there, templates and playbooks, but that's got to be your first step to recovery. So I'm going to challenge all of you to ask yourself, what's the last NDA you had to review? Why? And was it worth it? There is always, I know, I have a bunch of lawyers on this call with me. I know, it depends. I know there's always some sort of an NDA that is absolutely needs you because it is scary, spicy, the CEO called you. That's okay. You know how to pick those out. There are too many of you, though, that are getting NDAs forwarded to you because there's a red line in it. It's a third-party NDA template, and they just click forward. And you're kind of in this position of having to say no. Having a policy helps you say no. It really does create a bit more of a solid ground that you're not being uncooperative and not unhelpful. You really are saying, nope, we agreed at the C-suite, at the corporate level with this policy that this is going to be something we're going to enable the business to do on their own. So please start there and consider what it is that you can hand off to the business to handle without legal, and or be very crisp on what it is you want to review in the context of NDAs. All right, so business owners, I will stop beating up the NDAs. We're going to move up the value chain here a little bit, and up the triangle to our trained contract management team. These are professionals who have contracting as really core part of their job. Again, could be a very, very, very small number of people, if at all. We're going to expand the definition a little bit to procurement. If you have a procurement function at your company, if you're dealing on the buy side of contracts, which, by the way, every company has procurement contracts, and every company who has anybody responsible on the commercial legal side ends up dealing with these whether they like to or not, even though they're brought in to deal with revenue generating contracts. On the revenue side, you might have a deal desk, you might have a kind of a deal operations, a business ops function, somebody who's there as a conduit between the business owners and your third party, your counterparty, in order to help facilitate the contracting process itself, in order to facilitate the negotiation. This team of people, human resources, they are an excellent place to consider creating a little bit more responsibility in the contracting negotiation processes. These are usually an identified specific group of people you can train, as opposed to kind of business owners, which are almost the company at large. These are a focus group of people that you can have recurring training, you can provide more substantive material and guidance. They kind of become somebody you can really hold accountable in a bit of a better, let's say, more productive way than oftentimes when you think about, oh my God, it's the whole company. So this, I would say, is your middle risk area, right? Your medium risk, where you're going, okay, you should know how to discuss invoice review timelines, right? Just invoice dispute section of an agreement. Kind of the business terms, even though, again, they're not the business owner, they should be your conduit between the business owner and either legal department and or directly to the third party or the counterparty. So thinking about business terms of, my gosh, payment terms, even jurisdiction, those are usually kind of a black and white, right? Either this state or this province or these other two are okay. So these are great ways to remove legal if these are the kinds of recurring topics you're negotiating within the context of a contract. I threw in PII as an example. That's kind of the little touch-sensitive nerve pain point with data protection, personal information. That comes up all the time. It is right now the bane of many commercial lawyers' existence, regardless of the industry you're in, especially if you're doing buy side, you're buying SaaS. Everybody's buying SaaS. Again, that is the state and evolution of technology. You're buying it whether you want to or not, or your company's buying it with or without you. Data protection is the top. It's squarely in the middle of that. Depending on the maturity and skill set of your contracting professionals, this middle tier community, there's opportunity to enable and empower them also, even with data protection. It's a hot topic, so it may or may not work in your case, but definitely consider the other things, the core business terms, again, payment timelines, invoicing sections of contracts. Those really should not be handled by the legal team at all, if you can get out of it. And then finally, I don't have to tell you what should be in the triangle. It's probably a subset of what you're doing today, but it's a subset that keeps you up at night. It's not the NDA, it's not the disputing invoices terms. It is the stuff that really you're there to provide your highest and best value, and you want to spend your time on. Right? These are the deals where if you're kind of a contract nerd like some of us are, and living in commercial contracting, these are the ones you want to get your hands on. So the goal is to keep those at the tip of the triangle and proportionately the smaller in number, but the bulk of your time. Right? So it's an 80-20 rule. Reverse. You want to spend 80% of your time definitely on 20% of the contracting volume, roughly, if we kind of go in broad strokes here. So that these are kind of the substantive ways to break up a legal review policy. I want to take a couple of minutes to talk about some drafting tips or really like the mechanics of the policy itself. As I mentioned, call it what you want. But without a couple of things, it'll be completely useless. So you might kind of be wringing your hands and making yourself a little uncomfortable with where you're going to push the risk and how you're going to step out of some of these contracts. But then what? They have to be communicated out. This has to be communicated out. First and foremost, talk to your C-suite. And what I realized, I actually have a couple of tips written out. I'll update the deck, Shaya, and I'll send it to you so you can have the latest and greatest to send out to people as they ask. Or you have some tips also on policy drafting. Recently did a session on this where I realized that's kind of its own, kind of like simple contract drafting, has its own resources and training materials you can find. Drafting a policy, think of it almost like you're drafting a contract in the modern age. It has to be written very, very, very simple language, the most simple language possible. And if it is a complicated policy, because again, you've created these ifs, thens, and I don't care what type of contract it is, if it's this value or dollar threshold, I still want to see it, unless it's that, and maybe if it's in this jurisdiction, then you kind of go through all those mental gymnastics. That's hard to document in a policy that is easy to absorb and consume for the business owners and for the enterprise as a whole. Remember, policies, like everything else, can be iterative. There is nothing set in stone here. You do a version 1, you issue it on a certain date, you update it 6 months later, a year later, that's great too. First step to recovery is to just write something out. But when you write it out, simple drafting, this policy cannot be longer than a page. I got a client that gave me a policy that was about 12 pages. It had terms defined in quotes, and it had words like whereas in it. If your policy has the word whereas, it's not going to be a good policy. Not because substantively it's not great. People will not understand it. They will not read it. They will check out the minute they see that. So it has to be drafted ideally in bullets, no full prose sentences, and very easy to navigate using terms that the business understands, regardless of what we might call it amongst commercial contracting legal types. So simple drafting, number 1. Number 2, make sure the C-suite, the peers of the CLO, the peers of the GC know this is coming. Ideally, have them take a look at it. Again, they're not going to be interested in reading it, maybe the details of it. They need to know that they can rely on their head of legal to define the policy, but make sure they know it's coming. Most importantly, make sure they know what that means. That means legal, we, the department, will stop doing certain things we might have been doing for you. This will be a change. So you need to have the C-suite bought in ahead of time, right? In conjunction with launching the policy. And then number 3, communicate. You got to push this out. You got to push it out more than once. You have to have it readily available. You want to be able to point to it because it is now your sign. It is now your note. Read that. Told you we're not going to do this. We told you about this. We communicated it out. Maybe you have a little mini training material content, super small, bite size, easy to take in content. And please know, I'm not trying to kind of, dumb this down. It's not about that. It is about the realities of a fast-moving business. Nobody has time to read legal guidance, legal training, right? That sounds super painful. So think about what works in your environment, but the policy should be available, accessible to everybody, and then communicate it out on a regular basis if you can. There's no reason why this can't be part of some recurring, ongoing communications if those exist, and you can kind of slide into those. So with that, we will move on from policy. I will pause for a minute, though. I do want to ask my friends at LawView, with all the clients, customers that they deal with, even in the early stages where you're just starting a conversation, how many would you say have a policy?
I think a lot of the folks that I talk to don't, to be honest with you, at that point. And really it gets to the point where a lot of people just don't even know where to start. It's great to be able to, start drafting one and to go to the C-suite, but what information needs to be, included in that in order to get that buy-in? And, at that point it's chaotic, right? And you're just, responding every time you need to respond. And you're not really thinking about where are the requests coming from? What type of requests are these? What kind of contracts are we drafting? So for us, at least when we're having conversations and talking about legal tech and talking about LawView, it's talking about making sure that you're taking control of that intake. And you said earlier, Lucy, that automation, right? That can be anything, right? It can be emails, it could be, actual, automating your contracts and generation. And I think that really comes down to it is, taking those incremental steps of getting control of your inbox, getting control then of the work that you're pulling in, because then you can really see where those contracts are, how many of each type you're working on, where your time is spent, where the risk is. And that's going to really help you, I think, draft that policy and then take it to the C-suite and to be able to have that really good conversation about this is why we need to go here.
Absolutely. Yeah, Matt, you were in-house. Did you have a policy?
No, I'm furiously taking notes at all the things I did wrong, right? I mean, like the lens I have in-house was always in hyper-growth tech companies, and so often, and they're a lot of the GCs I speak with on a day-to-day, you're the first in, right? There is no established guardrails to put policy around it. It certainly doesn't feel like it, to use your analogy, you can't breathe, right? Or drinking from the fire hydrant of just stuff coming at you. And so, you've got that environment, you've got just shifting risk appetite, shifting commercial objectives. And so I think one of the points I just wrote down that you wrote, I communicate a lot, which is you can't overcook, you don't want to overcook these things, right? Like if you're trying to create the perfect policy day one, it doesn't work, right? Like you just need to treat it as a living, breathing document. I take from the tech sphere of an MVP, right? It's an iterative process. It will shift over time. But I think, to Jen's point, that's why we spend a lot of time thinking about, you need to understand what your universe is. Like you may only decide legal can only do 4 or 5 things well. You need to understand the 300 out there to at least make that decision. And to understand that, you need to be reaching into the business and see what everyone's working on. But yeah, no, learning a lot, Lucy, scribbling notes.
With that, Matt, that was a perfect segue in. And Jennifer, you mentioned it. Matt, you mentioned it again. You don't know what you don't know. So we're going to take another poll. I'm really curious about how the business engages with the legal teams here that are on this webinar with us. And I mentioned it, I alluded to it earlier, technology is core. We know that. People aren't walking pieces of paper usually anymore down to people's offices, especially anymore after, of course, COVID and the world has changed. So I would love to put up this next poll. Shai, if you can kick this one off. We're really curious how contract requests come to you. How do requests for help come to you? I will again provide a moment of therapy while we conduct the poll. I've seen it all. I remember the first time I was shocked to hear that in-house legal teams are getting texts. I mean, regular phone texts, like your kid sends on what's for dinner. The text right after that could be like, "Can you take a look at this?" And there's a contract. I stopped being shocked by that, but I remember the first time I heard it, it was like, wow, I did not know it had gotten that bad. And by it had gotten, meaning the pace, the speed, the frenzy of work matched with the reliance and dependence and comfort with technology that we have in our day lives, right? I mean, we live and breathe. Our cell phones have now become an attachment to us. So it's no wonder, younger companies, by the way, everybody gives out their personal cell phone numbers to everybody, which that was a shocker for me. I was like, oh, I had a desk phone. I was growing up, and you call that, I pick up, and I help. But my cell phone was like family only, friends only. That has all completely smashed together. Now, besides, of course, text messaging on the cell phone, we all have the same apps we have on our laptop. So we're getting Slack messages with contracts attached to them, Teams messages, Google chat, old chats from some conference call that finished. You're like, whoa, where'd you come from? I was done talking to you. And suddenly, there's an attachment with a contract there. Of course, there's still good old email, which will be around for some time still. But there's been some great progress from a technology perspective there as well, with some of the CLM systems that are trying to help replace and or enhance the email experience for contracting workflow. But let's see what we have here. I think I'll go ahead and we'll end the poll now, and then we can share the results. So how does your business submit your contract requests for you? Drafting or review? No one way. So a quarter of you comes at you. You don't know where or when it's coming next or from where. We get that world. Email, Teams, and or Slack. That is clearly, almost half of you. And I think that covers most of them. So good for you. You are not getting them via text. That is great. I'm always interested in this there's an even number between those that are using enterprise systems that are frankly designed for other things. I don't think that's offensive when I say they were not intended for contracts workflow, but they have been used for that with some bubblegum, tape, glue, and all kinds of other standing on one leg on a Tuesday, if you're lucky. And then, of course, there's dedicated CLM systems, which is an even percentage as to those using these other systems. So when I see that 14% are using systems like Salesforce, ServiceNow, or Jira, kind of largely known as either ticketing systems in the ServiceNow and Jira context, Salesforce is obviously a sales functioning, system designed for that. With the same number as dedicated CLM systems, that tells me that about a quarter of you here are either searching for a way to do this well and right, and you found the CLM technology or using other technology because those other options aren't great. The email option is not great, and obviously messaging and Slack and all that is not great either. And then a small percentage of you are using other legal tech applications. Maybe drop in a few examples into the chat. I'm sure that my lobby friends are curious. I know I am. If it's not these enterprise applications, kind of what else is out there? So by all means, throw in some samples and ideas into the chat. I'm sure everybody will learn from that. So we talked about creating a policy, and I mentioned whether or not you may want to use the names of certain contract types or certain templates, or just describe the type of engagement as well. What I'm showing you here, again, there is no one right or wrong. This is a sample of a piece of homework that I think everybody should do. This goes back to what Matt and Jennifer were saying. You got to know your universe before you create a policy. The only way to know your universe is you need to know what's coming in. What kind of contracts does this company do, especially when you're just joining, and most of you aren't with a company from day one. Most of you that are on this webinar probably. So you got to know what they're contracting for when you get there, and then you can make improvements. So knowing your universe, email is hard for that. That's why CLM technologies are popular. That is why some of these other systems are being used, because we're trying to create a funnel, right? Right now, if you're getting contracts in every possible way, there's no funnel. And so it is all anecdotal and in your head. Maybe you're doing a spreadsheet, maybe you've got a little post-it note and you're jotting things down there. Once you have that, you can start creating buckets and categories of contracts so that you can start orienting yourself around where you spend your time. the resourcing you need, whether building your own team or outsourcing, getting help from law firms or third-party providers. And of course, setting the rules, what you want to play in, and then you got to build the templates. Either you need to build the templates or come to terms with the fact that you may not be able to use your own template because of the leverage in the market. That is something that gets overlooked in a lot of conversations about templates. I want to take a second there. Again, what you're looking at is just an example. If it's helpful for you, this is for a technology company. So it's some variation of things I've experienced in-house at 2 tech companies, and of course, supporting a lot of clients that are tech companies. But roughly, this is a pretty good sample of what I see more and more. Now, again, you may not have a partner channel if you're in a tech business, and that falls off the box. So just a sample, that's my lawyering caveat here. I'll keep saying over and over. But the purpose of this is then to say, okay, I've got this view of my world of contracts at the company. That's what the purpose of this document is completely, or this chart. Then you're going to start highlighting where you think you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck, meaning your time, maybe money. If you need help creating templates, you'll go to a third party, or just because of time, not because you don't have it, or there's subject matter that you're going, wow, I'm the first in-house counsel, I'm a great corporate lawyer. I can wheel and deal mergers and acquisitions. I'm the first in-house lawyer, and I'm realizing I'm spending time doing IP license agreements over and over and over again, because that's the bulk of the business. That's okay. That's the part of I'm here to support the business. I need to learn how to do that. That means you may not be writing your own template. You might have to go to a third party to get a template. A law firm, obviously, is a top choice for most of you, and that's okay. But this gives you an orientation around what are the right kinds of templates you need, because you have the market leverage, right? You have a position in the market where you can, I'm going to say push, that's not a gentle word, but encourage the use of your own templates on the buy side or on the revenue side, if that makes sense. NDA, we're going to, again, favorite whipping boy, everybody, that's terrible, I should call that. That's my favorite example. Everybody should have an NDA template. Not because you may be the biggest, most powerful company to force the use of yours. 8 out of 10 times, the other side may or may not have their template yet. So depending on who you're dealing with, who's watching this webinar, could be that whoever you're dealing with doesn't have one, but you do. Always have your own NDA template, and I'm going to challenge you to keep it to 3 pages. So if you don't have your own now and you're about to start one, do not let yourself go over 3 pages. You've already saved yourself a ton of time redoing and simplifying it later. So NDA template needs to exist. I don't even think that's on here. I'm covering half my screen with our faces here, but it's not on here because it's really just not a kind of substantive template, and it is table stakes for every company. But once you have an idea of where your market strengths are, then you work on creating your first party templates, and you recognize where you don't have the market strength, you're going to still need some sort of enablement, probably for the business. That's Playbooks. We'll get to that in a minute. So back to templates. Create your categories. Start with no more than, and by start, you can only start with one. I mean, this is a linear process for the most part, unless you have unlimited resources, or you maybe have a little bucket of resources where I'm going to use this money to create templates. Please don't start with more than 3. There are very few companies that I meet where I would say from day one, oh, well, you at least need 5 solid templates. Few. Those are usually bigger. They are more complex. They have infrastructure. They have resources. They have high volume. I would say 3 is a really good starting point. So, Jennifer, I think you said, some companies just don't know where to start with policy. A lot of times they don't know where to start with templates either. It can be overwhelming because everything looks different when it's coming at you on third-party paper. It's kind of like this. It's kind of like that one. That's kind of like this. And you get a little paralyzed. So I would say start with your best market leverage position, where you want to be able to use your template. Maybe that's actually part of your business strategy that you work with your C-suite on. Say, hey, this third-party paper is killing us. It is what's causing so much of the negotiation cycle. That difference between negotiating off of your template or negotiating off of a third-party template is a huge fork in the road when it comes to thinking about a policy, thinking about your resourcing, time spent, money spent on commercial contracting. So start crafting for yourself a bit of a matrix of, this is the highest volume of contracts I tend to deal with. Most come on third-party paper, but maybe they would use first-party paper. So I'm going to now create a subset of those where I know I'm going to create a template that's on my paper that I think we can push. And I'm going to make sure the C-suite's bought into the fact that I want anybody who has access to this template or anybody I empower to use this template, that's the first step. They have to commit to pushing out our template, or else why did you spend all your time creating one? It's no use for the legal department to be sitting on a pile of beautiful, top-notch, simply drafted, latest and greatest templates if the business has no access to them, doesn't know how to use them, doesn't know when to use them, or just refuses to use them, which is why I always say the C-suite across the company has to know what legal's doing in this scenario, in this world of contracting, because contracting are business vehicles. Yes, they're legal documents, and that gets everybody nervous. But you're papering a deal. You're papering a business goal and a business outcomes to make sure everybody's aligned with this philosophy and approach to templates that you're going to design. This is a great place to start setting some taxonomy around the company. What is a master service agreement? What's an MSA? Is it a master service agreement? Is it a master supply agreement? Is it a multi-year service agreement? Is that what the M stands for? I've seen it all. And never looks the same anywhere. And so legal has a great opportunity to drive that. Use this exercise of getting your current state of templates, your understanding your current world, to defining the categories, creating the taxonomy, and start using that in all of your communications. Use it over and over and over again, and don't fall back to the words that you know, well, they've always called it this, so I should call it that, if you know it's blatantly not a market fit. You know enough about negotiating with, the opposing party, or the other side, the counterparty. You know what words work amongst the negotiating community, and then you have to somehow gel that and marry it with the words that are used at your company. And sometimes it's an educational journey that might take a little time. Finally, we'll get to playbooks. This is what we're here to talk about for sure. And then we'll save about 10-15 minutes to do Q&A. So get your questions ready for sure. Okay. So playbooks, we just talked a lot about policy and templates. The way to make it all then real are playbooks. Playbook is another one of these words that in the CLM community just gets thrown out there. Do you have a playbook? Do you have a playbook? We need a playbook. That's in the technology world become confused with the automated types of playbooks and trying to automate a playbook. A playbook can be substantive, it can be operational. I want to walk us through the couple of different versions that I've seen. This might help some of you go, oh, I didn't realize I could subdivide this, and maybe a playbook was all too much. I don't know where to start. And some were being very narrow about a particular, template agreement type of a playbook. So I've laid out what I think are kind of 4 core types of playbooks that you might want some combination of, and or at least one of. I'll walk through those quickly, and then I do have a question for my law view friends as well, and what they're seeing in the world of playbooks with their customers that they're reaching out to. But first, let me do a walkthrough here. So first of all, a playbook designed for the law department. This one is your probably what most of you envision when you think about a playbook. This is a guide to a particular document, a contract, how to negotiate it. Inside of that contract, there's a lot of guidance. It isn't just a negotiation, fallbacks, use this, not that. There's also a lot of background. There's a lot of history. It is very much a knowledge sharing mechanism. It's an educational tool. When you have new lawyers join, you want them to know how we negotiate this particular document, this contract. These tend to be longer. They tend to be a living thing that people chime in on. They tend to have a lot of subject matter expertise input as well. You might have inputs from the tax team. You might have inputs from the IP side, the IP counsel, if they're inside the law department. Whatever it is, this is a pretty robust document. I would say keep it for law department eyes only. I've seen playbooks that are created that then they're trying to be used in the legal team and outside the legal team. Usually those people are not speaking the same language. So law department playbook, that is usually contract specific. It's a particular big, usually the biggest, meatiest template that they work in. Often, usually they're on their first party template. That is on their template, how to negotiate that template. And they're pretty big, pretty long, kind of complex, but useful for the legal team. Empowerment guides are and again, I'm giving these names because I have to differentiate because I see the confusion out there in the market. An empowering guide is just that. This is the guide that you are handing to the business. This is what you're handing to somebody outside of the law department, usually completely, and you are giving them an actionable negotiation guide. You're empowering them to negotiate. You can call this a negotiation guide. Maybe that's a better word. These are going to be also template specific. For this template that we've created, where we have the leverage, or we like to push our template, here's what you're allowed to negotiate. It is oftentimes approached section by section, also like the legal department playbook, but this one is not all sections are usually covered in it. You're kind of empowering particular sections, right, for the business to handle, back to the examples I gave earlier, the invoice section, the jurisdiction section, payment section, kind of those business terms. And the guidance is very, it's very specific. It's very, if they deviate from this, you are allowed to accept these kinds of words, or, and sometimes, and, or it provides actually copy and paste verbiage where you can say, you know what, they don't like this, they push anything back, regardless of what they push back, offer them this other fallback. This is fine too. So it's very black and white, very little room for kind of independent judgment, independent drafting. It is intended to really hand off if then, and you can take this pretty far depending on who you're empowering. Again, the bottom tier of your triangle or the middle tier, then this could be a little bit more complex depending on who you're handing it off to. But think differently than you would for educating your law department colleagues and counterparts. It's a different angle, different types of words, just different substantive concepts also you want to touch, right? Whereas the law department, when you're going to go through the whole contract, you're going to do all the provisions, but this one you're going to focus on the ones that you really want to empower them with. An outsourcing playbook, something we didn't get to at all. We actually have that in our third upcoming session, will be about resourcing, the human resourcing of the contracting entire CLM, and outsourcing to a third party. We hear that a lot as well. When should I outsource? We've heard LPO in the days of the past, legal process outsourcing, alternative legal service providers, which are ALSP, it's a lot of alphabet soup. LSPs, legal service providers, now we're not alternative anymore. Whatever you call it, these are third-party entities, usually not law firms, that are taking on your lower complexity, higher volume types of contracts. Their playbook is a combination of the how-to flow of contracts, the escalation path back in, as well as a very black and white negotiation guide of specific terms. So it is a more complex dynamic document than a pure guide for negotiating specific terms. It also has workflow and escalation rules. It has scope, what they can or can't do without reverting it back in-house. So different type of playbook there. And then we have an operations playbook. And this is all about the how the contract moves, where to go, what to click. Is there a system, a new system, a CLM system that is available? That means do not email me, go there. An operations playbook tells people really the how contracts flow, not how to negotiate the contract. So outside the four corners of the document, how the document moves. And on that, I do want to ask our friends at LawView, what are they seeing in terms of workflow, and are the customers who are engaging you for the whole workflow of getting their matters and their contract matters coming in, do they have operations playbooks? I mean, do they know how it's going to work once they have your fabulous tool lit up?
I think the beauty of our fabulous tool, Lucy, is the fact that we kind of combine that all together. When you have a great intake platform that allows you to customize and configure the workflows within it, you really can tailor it for the specific department of the business, for example, that you're working with. And so that's the big thing, is really integrating that operations along with kind of like the choose your own adventure path that they're taking, right? And it really works well because you're enabling the business at that point, right? You're not making them read a playbook. You're enabling them as you go through the steps to make the next step, to know what information they're going to need, to know what's going to happen next. And then within the CLM itself, giving them the quick and easy buttons to say, next step is click for send to legal for approval, or click to send for signing. And I think that's really the big thing, is when you start, thinking about a playbook, often people think about, that document, right, where it's 1, 2, 3, do this, do that. And quite often I think business users might get a little bit little scared, right? A little bit standoffish on using that. So for us, it's really about empowering the business and meeting them where they are, letting them use the portal, but also letting them still maybe use Slack or letting them use email. And I think that's really where we're seeing a lot of the success with our clients of getting their business adoption with using the portal, and definitely being comfortable with self-serve and really knowing when they need to go to legal.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd add to that, right, is that we often see that most in-house teams that come to us know they need to do more of this stuff, right? But it's hard to find the space to do it, and so implementing a tool creates kind of the structure around, oh, I need to do this, and it starts to create that teams think around it. I think if teams out there can try and elevate out of the weeds and get to this kind of playbook earlier, like, we all know the efficiencies are there, but it's just hard to get there, right? And so where we often see it is, again, they're implementing a tool, so it becomes front of mind. So it's an opportune time for us to then run this. But I love how you've split this out, particularly the difference between empowerment and law department, right? And the empowerment is just, it pays back, many times over. It's just hard to put in play.
Yeah, and I think the putting in place, obviously that's where automation makes huge strides. It using automation to operationalize your playbook, which actually is operationalizing your policy, right? It's all connected. Once the law department figures out what they do and don't want to do, then they can define for the business how to get to them, when to get to them, for what stuff, and then you can use the technology to make it even easier, right? So you can say, come to me by walking to my office with a piece of paper for these things, because I have it in my policy and I've handed you the template to do it, and I've given you the empowerment guide, but now it's still, very manual. Or of course, using automation helps move that along. So really, you in many ways, and I've seen this, by the way, when policies are drafted. One thing I kind of left off when I didn't use the word operational policy, because again, operations isn't something that in-house lawyers we're trained on that extensively, as you all know, right? So Operation what? I'm legal counsel, but really creating a policy that is realistic. I mean, your policy can't be, don't come to me for this or come to me for that. Oh, and by the way, you don't even know my email address. I mean, the policy, to be a good actionable policy, usually has to have also a little bit of that how in it. It may have an alias, it may have a link, it may have the name of a system to look up, online in their intranet, but whatever it is, a policy should be actionable. You should be able to read it and go, oh, now I know what to do. Now that you've informed me of this policy, thank you, I business owner, go, oh, I should have, and there should be a click or a place to go, right? A system to access. So the policy goes together very much with the playbook, because again, without it, you just, having a policy is like, it's like posting a speed limit sign. Okay, 55. That's it. Like there has to be sometimes a police officer somewhere once in a while to remind you that thing's for real. So anyway, I like everything you guys are saying, that definitely this is an opportunity for automation if there was one. And what you're automating is really a workflow. In the next session, we're also going to spend time on process mapping and process. I haven't even used the word process really as much as I typically do, because that is really also its own beast. It's the oxygen and NDA of any improvement, of any automation journey, any CLM journey. Process mapping, process optimization is part of it. So we've talked about, we'll talk about the people in the next session as well, but people, process, and tools, we know all go together. A minute or two on third-party playbooks, third-party templates, third-party paper. Again, as I mentioned, I am not underestimating the fact that most of you probably spend most of your time on negotiating third-party paper. And when you do, this concept of playbook seems to kind of become, well, what do you mean? But playbooking what? Everything looks different every time I get it. But you can create a third-party paper, I would say, negotiation guide, right? It is some combination of a law department playbook and empowerment guide, because you're now thinking through the concepts that keep you up at night in this third-party paper that comes your way. We all know between us, honestly, it's the same 5 to 7 that if you really had a gun to your head, God forbid, you would pick the same handful every time. You would let a lot of stuff fall off if you're forced to, which a lot of you are just about a sheer time. You just don't have the time to redline every word and read every word. So you go to the limits and liability section, to the warranty section, to the IP ownership section, maybe force majeure these days, maybe termination for convenience, you name it. But there's a reason that the World Commerce and Contracting Organization does these top negotiated terms every couple of years. They do a survey, and guess what? It's the same ones every couple of years, because that's what we know. We know those are the biggest risks and the biggest pain points. So yes, there is a way to create a third-party negotiation guide or a third-party empowerment guide. Actually, a third-party empowerment guide might be one of the easiest places to start. If you're empowering the business to do something, tell them, no matter what the rest of the document says, first check the payment terms or the termination for convenience section. Those are actually quite a simple place to start, where, hey, if those are a problem, go fix those before you even get to anything else, and just reserve your right to also get legal counsel to review the rest of the contract. But that could be a lot of the stumbling blocks you can clear out as well. So different types of playbooks for different purposes. Know your audience and know your purpose are really the top two rules. Any of these are good to have if you don't have any at all. Think about where to start, where you're going to get the biggest bang again for your buck for the time you're going to invest. By the way, just the exercise of writing these out, kind of like process mapping, which is for another time, but the exercise of writing these out is very eye-opening. You won't realize, wow, until I had to really think through that limit of liability section, which we know is one of our favorite brain twisters. How come do I always do that? I say always, that's purely anecdotal, because you're not keeping track probably of your substantive default positions or your substantive positions where you end up signing and what your deviations were from your preferred position. This forces you to create that preferred position, especially in a third-party template, right, or third-party guide. With a template, you've created your preferred position. You may or may not get it, but you've created it, you've written it down. That's the first forcing mechanism. The playbook is then really where the rubber hits the road, where you're going, okay, but if they push back, usually I end up accepting also this. That's that honest reality check that you need, and you need to write that down. It is really eye-opening, and it's a great way to level set across the C-suite, across your peers, what your actual positions are. Because guess what? Legal shouldn't be in the position of closing, shutting down deals, right? We shouldn't be in the position of going, no, we can't accept that. You should be in an advisory position at the end of the day. For the most part, you got to be able to go to somebody at whatever high level you need to go to and say, look, here's the thing. This is the best we can do with the negotiation, but here's the risk and here's what it means. Do you want it or not? So defining some of these playbooks really helps you kind of go, oh, yeah, I think this isn't going to be a sword we die on. We kind of act like it is, but at the end of the day, we don't. So how long do I need to get to that end of the day? I need to get from A to B, and I cannot spend 8 months in a negotiation dance that we know will end up in the same 3 to 5 provisions every time. So this helps you fast forward that. With that, I think we're going to turn to Q&A. I know we've lost a lot of our participants at the top of the hour, which tends to happen as people have other obligations and commitments. Very quickly, I do want to just put some of our contact information. Reach out to me. If you love your handy dandy phone and love these QR codes, here's your test of how tech savvy you are. Feel free to reach out to me this way or connect with me on LinkedIn, as well as our LawView friends who have brilliantly opened, I think, the eyes of the world to say, hey, most of the matters that might be coming to your inbox are actually contracts. So matter management, contract management, they're doing some creative things to piece those together. But reach out to Jennifer and Matt as well. Any questions? So
I just want to say thank you, Lucy, another amazing webinar, and thank you, all of you, for your support, Matt and Jennifer, for participating. I'm kind of surprised. There was a ton of engagement in the chat, but I don't see so many questions. I guess you're so clear and straightforward that nobody has any questions and everything is in tip-top shape. But I guess while people are coming up with questions or thinking about it, Matt and Jennifer, are there any, you're deep in, you're very involved in the CLM world. What are you seeing from your clients in terms of pain points? Where is there a lot of need that you're seeing, and how does that relate to policy templates? Is this something you recommend your clients to do?
Yeah, Well, I mean, first, I just thanks to Lucy again. You know, we chat a lot, and every time we chat, I learn a bunch more things. And I think, Shai, that's probably why you're not seeing too many questions, right? It's a great topic, but the engagement in the chat is awesome to see. We pay a lot of attention to that at LawView, right? And how we can create the environment to help develop kind of these playbooks and operationalize them, right? And you know, as we know to Lucy and some of our friends on the chat, that we see, you know, our product thesis at least is you need to start with an understanding of the single system of record. You need to understand your universe, right? So that's the importance of matter intake and being able to triage and divvy up work amongst the team, starting with a matter that almost always ends with the contract, but not always, right? But you need to see that entire universe. And once you have that universe and the entirety of that data, you can then start to think about or start to do a better job of understanding who the frequent flyers in the business are, where the opportunities to train, educate, playbook, templatize, etc. And so that's how we think about the product. And so I love seeing this engagement and the comments are coming through, and you know, it helps us as we build out our integrations and build out our product and core platform more. So yeah, a long-winded way of saying thanks, Lucy, and thanks, Shai, and thanks for the engagement in the channel.
And there are some great questions that have popped in. So Shai, I don't know if you shamed the group, but boy, suddenly there's a bunch of questions that came in. I saw one, I'll jump in just the one I saw, and then I saw there's a few others as well, but centers of excellence. You know, somebody mentioned that, but there's some I think, chatter going on about that also in the interweb sphere of CLM talk. They've existed for a while. You're really large enterprise corporate departments who deal with high volumes of contracts, whether it's supply chain companies, you know, companies that have a lot of supply chain, like car manufacturing, for example, or in pharma, like clinical trials and testing, high volume, maybe not complex, but high volume contracts. Centers of excellence do exist in those larger enterprises. Oftentimes they are born in other parts, not in the department, in the law department, because there is somebody either in sourcing or, you know, in the business itself that they want to really gather that control around contracts. Sometimes when the topic is brought up, and there isn't a home for it, legal is often the kind of orphanage for contracting operations and contracting process. So what the Center of Excellence really is, it is the home for what I like to call it, it's a contracting operation, right? It's an operation. It's really one of the core, you know, it's kind of a legal operation. It's one of the few truly legal operations, because you are dealing with what's inside the four corners of the document, as well as all the procedures, systems around how the contracts get done. So a Center of Excellence, think of it as, you kind of have, you know, triangle, you know, at the top, somebody who's in charge of all the stuff we just talked about, the rules around who touches what parts of contracts, how they get around to who they need to go, what are the templates that are available, who should be using them, and how they should be using them. It is kind of a center for the knowledge management of everything having to do with contracting. And there's a decision-making function to it, which is what I love. When I hear Center of Excellence, I want to know that it isn't pure knowledge sharing and resource of information, which it has to be. That's table stakes. It has to have useful, actionable, easy to access information. But there's also some gravitas that comes with the Center of Excellence, meaning these are also the decision makers. They're the ones who are going to decide fallbacks, right? They're going to consult with counsel. They're going to get whatever inputs they need, but that role should be a pretty high level role where they are really driving the strategy of how contracts get done. They are responsible and accountable for the metrics and the data around the contracting flow itself. And substantively, they're going to be some of the decision makers, or certainly force the decisions at the right level to be able to push back on some who might feel they have authority to make decisions, but really, you know, are doing a disservice to the business potentially. So there's a right place and way to do centers of excellence, but they're definitely not for every company, I would say.
There was a really good question about how do you train your business people to recognize risky terms, you know, worth bringing to legal. Any insights on that?
I mean, the simple reality of all of CLM, everything about it, improvements to it is change management. Everything about it comes down to the people, which is why I save that for its own session, because it's all about the people. It doesn't matter how great a system is. It doesn't matter how beautiful the templates are, how well written your policy is, or how many times, how well you've done the training. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make a drink. So the best practices, the best tips I have, they need to know what's in it for them. They have to know why they're spending any time listening to anybody from the legal department go on about contracts. They need to know what's in it for them. There also needs to be some sense of accountability on the business. So this is why it's so important to have the C-suite involved in this. You want the highest level of people across the whole company and all the departments, knowing that they're going to have their people in their organization accountable for certain aspects, for certain parts of the contract. So a lot of it starts with a top down. I'm not saying you need a hammer. It's not about that, but you need that air cover to be able to show some good examples of what happens when the business isn't following the new policies, the new procedures, using the system the way they were taught. So, it is a carrot and a stick. So they need to know what's in it for them. You need to appeal to their, hey, we're corporate citizens here. We all have a job to do. We're all here to do deals, or we're all here to close contracts. Appeal to them that way. The content and the material absolutely has to be user-friendly. It has to be. That's like table stakes rule, number 2, and number 3, that's C-suite buy-in. That is the magical combination. Having said all of that, you will have naughty people who don't listen. And we cannot plan for them. And I used to say that all the time. I will not plan for the 2% of the naughty folks who want to go outside the system, around the system, avoid legal, do deals on napkins. You cannot build for that. No system will prevent that. No tool will prevent that. So just know that you kind of have to accept that as part of, again, 80-20 rule. Go for the 90-10 in this case. You should expect 90%, to follow the rule. So it's the magical combination with a little bit of accepting reality that can't make them listen to you.
There was like a follow-up question about, do you recommend any like formal training for the business? Like, Emma Thompson commented that she did a law school 101 business, and I guess went through, relevant materials and provisions, and that sounds like a good idea. Is that something you recommend? And,
I do. I think it has to fit culturally into the company. So if legal is the only kind of corporate function that suddenly is doing trainings, like, okay, well, that has to be, again, support at the highest level. Yes, this is important. But if others are, right, if HR puts out training, which we know they usually do, there is no reason why legal shouldn't as well. So it's always valuable. You just don't know how much it'll work. But again, you're throwing at the business different vehicles and forms of information that work for them. So I do think training is valuable. I think it needs to be current. It needs to be consistent. It needs to be recurring. And again, simple, super, super simple. They don't need to become contracting experts. They don't need to know how to negotiate the intersection between the limits of liability and the insurance and the indemnification provision on their own. But they need to understand why limit of liability at the end of the day is a business call. So yeah, I'm a big fan of training if you can get the support.
And Matt and Jennifer, do you have any thoughts on this? Is this something you work with your clients to do when they're implementing a CLM?
Certainly something we talk a lot about. I have a particular lens of kind of the early stage, and growth tech companies, and often you're the first lawyers they've really dealt with, right? So you're starting from scratch with a pretty young workforce, and various iterations of it. I can see in the comments, like lunch and learns, someone said that, the legal one-on-one sessions, we also, knowledge base, somewhere to go where there is content to read up, right, in an asynchronous format. So yeah, we do, right. I'm a big proponent of it. Again, it's just like creating the space for it, but the ROI is there when you can do it.
Okay. Definitely. So one more question, and then we'll break for the day, and I'll let the panels have one final comment, I guess. But last question is, how do you avoid over playbooking, where lawyers start to feel like they have no discretion in their negotiations, or feel like the playbook is not flexible enough for negotiations or other legal jurisdictions? Any advice or insights on that?
I have to admit, I laughed on that one, and I wasn't laughing to be rude, but I've heard it so much just in tech for the last 10 years. We need to let the lawyers be lawyers. But I've also negotiated so many contracts that sometimes I feel like they negotiate to negotiate. So I think there's an interesting line on that one, right? With the autonomy and the empowerment to do your lawyering with, having a playbook to frankly move you from doing the things that maybe, you don't need to do, to doing the more challenging things, and to the items, right, that really are, the higher risk pieces. So again, not meaning to laugh to be rude, but it was just, I found that interesting because I hear that quite often of, I can't do a playbook because then they can't be lawyers.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about playbooks, I think, especially for the legal team, is you're aligning on a common risk tolerance. I'm not telling you how to do your job. I'm making it easier for you to go, well, I don't know, 100 million cap, that seems okay. You oftentimes, most times, have no frame of reference, no, besides your own experience. It is completely anecdotal. And that might be okay, but if you're in a completely new industry or move to a different geography, why not? Why not? It's just training. It's just education. We're not taking away their right to go with a playbook set. By the way, a playbook for a law department is not the rule. It is guidance. It is informative. It is information. That's why I say it has a lot more than just a particular this provision, do this, don't do that. Yeah, if you're doing a playbook like that, do this, don't do that, it's not going to be fun to be a lawyer in that department. But let me tell you why we prefer this, why we don't prefer that. Now I've got something to work with and I'll just be more efficient, and I'm going to stick with some party line, because you got to have a predictable experience. The bigger the department, the more you need a playbook, because then the business is forum shopping. I'll go to Lucy, and she always she sells a farm, or I'm never going to go to Matt. He takes 5 weeks to decide if A, B, and C, or whatever. They start forum shopping really quickly. So yeah, playbook shouldn't undermine your independent judgment and thinking at all. It should provide you with the information you need to make a smart decision. And we don't have that in-house, most of us.
Yeah, I think, I've always found one of the greatest stresses for some of the more junior team members as well is having all the responsibility but not the autonomy. And if there's some guardrails around a playbook, it removes that stress of I've got to get this done, but I actually don't know what our position is, and I can't get the GC's time to, and they're stuck in this lose-lose position. And it's a great cause of stress for more junior team members. And so it's part a form of training, but part a form of just giving them clearing the trees, like to give them space to do their job. So I think it's empowering, not the other way around if it's done right.
Exactly.
I agree. I actually I worked at a big tech company, big SaaS company, and it was the first time I ever saw a playbook. And I thought it was super cool, actually, because they baked in rationales for why they had positions that way. And so I thought it was incredibly informative and useful and valuable. And I would say if you have, lawyers who feel constrained by the playbook, hear them out, find out where the pain points are, and perhaps, build in different discretion levels. This one requires management approval, but this one is okay. For instance, just as an idea. But like anything contracts, is always going to be pain points somewhere, and you just have to do this iteration a few times to see where they are and work around it. But playbooks are great. I enjoyed using it, and hopefully others will as well, and they won't feel constrained. So
I think it's definitely the power of messaging, right? And how you're messaging with the purpose of the playbook, and how it's to be used. I think that's really important, because I definitely have seen times where it's thrust upon you. This is what you can do, and you do feel like you have that constraint. Where if the messaging is exactly as Matt, Lucy, Shai, you've all explained, that this is your guardrails, right? This is your guide. I think that just makes a big difference. So it always comes down to that top-down messaging of the purpose of this initiative.
And I hope this doesn't. I hope it doesn't confuse a couple of different concepts here, Lucy. But I still see the playbooks as almost like a quasi checklist as well, right? Because it's reminding you to look at things you may not even have, again, focusing more on perhaps more the junior members of the team. It's like, oh, okay, I didn't realize I should be looking for a carve out for inconsequential loss or whatever, for consequential loss, sorry. And okay, I need to look for that. And oh, by the way, here's the playbook when I see it or don't see it. And it's kind of conflating two topics, I know, but I think it serves that dual purpose.
Awesome. Yeah. So thank you so much, Lucy, Jennifer, Matt. Any last words or final remarks for our audience before we sign off for the day? Lucy, you usually have some, you could talk for hours, Lucy.
Yeah, I was being polite for once. I was like, yes, of course. I was like, let me check what happens. Yeah, final thoughts. Something's better than nothing. And there's no one right way or place to tackle this. anything will help. The policy, I do like to say, is your first place. Even if you don't go so far as to write it down or communicate it, get it clear in your head. Just get comfortable with saying, I'm not going to look at this stuff anymore. And then the world will open up. So anything's better than nothing. These are all levers you can pull.
Awesome. Matt and Jennifer, anything?
Just a thank you from me. That was really great. Shai, Lucy, thanks, Jen, obviously, and to everyone engaging. That was awesome.
Yeah, this was a really great discussion, really fun to learn and to join in. So thank you for the forum.
All right, awesome. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you at the next IHC event next week, and have a great day, and we'll see everybody soon. Thanks again, Lucy, and love you for your support. Awesome job.